there is a memorial in Washington, D.C. that was constructed to honor those who had fallen in battle. Leading up to this memorial, there's a panel on the ground that is inscribed with these words: "Our nation honors her sons and daughters who answered the call to defend a country they never knew and a people they never met." At that memorial, there's also a wall which is inscribed with the letters, "Freedom is not free." Maybe you've been there and seen this memorial. You know, that's not the only time that people gave their lives for freedom. Yesterday, this whole weekend, we celebrate Independence Day, where almost 250 years ago, there were people who rose up to say that they would no longer bear the tyranny of another nation. The call to freedom, you could say, is written with the blood of those who have fallen. Now, I bring these historical events up not for their sake, but to have them point to something that happened even more long ago, 2,000 years ago. There was a poor carpenter who gave his life when he died on a cross. And before he died, he told those who would listen that he came to proclaim freedom, to set the oppressed free. He said that if he set people free, they would really, really be free. When he rose from the dead, his message became much more than just words. They became a way of life for his followers, and his followers kept telling everybody about him and the freedom that he gives. You might have guessed his name is Jesus. Jesus came to give freedom for all who would turn to him in faith. But what kind of freedom did Jesus come to give? If you are a follower of Jesus Christ today, what does it mean to be free, to be set free? I want to take the opportunity that this weekend provides when our minds are thinking about freedom to tell you about the freedom that Jesus gives. And I want to share with you one thing that freedom in Christ is not, and two things that freedom in Christ is. One thing freedom in Christ is not, and two things that freedom in Christ is. And I hope that these bless you today. First of all, the freedom that Jesus gives is not freedom to do whatever you want. It is not freedom to do whatever you want. We often give freedom that simple definition. The freedom to do whatever you want, freedom from limitation. You might say, I don't have work today, I'm free. My boss is out today, I'm free. My parents stepped out for a second, I'm free. My kids are in school, I'm free. That hasn't happened in a while. It's a snow day, so schools are closed, I'm free. That hasn't happened in a while either. But, you know, there's this release of responsibility somehow, so we say, we're free, right? And we easily jump from there to define freedom. I'm free as I can do whatever I want. In the passage we read today, the Apostle Paul, he's writing to the church in the city of Corinth. And in verse 23, he starts by saying this. He says, I have the right to do anything you say. Now, he was quoting some people in the church and what they were thinking and saying, that they had the right to do anything. A more literal translation of this is, everything is lawful. So some people were thinking that when you break God's laws, because Jesus forgives you, and Jesus forgives you every time you break God's laws, that released them from keeping God's laws. Other people were thinking, well, how much can I bend God's laws and still stay within them? You know, how much can I bend them and not sin? And other people were thinking, well, you know what, it doesn't matter. I can do whatever I want as long as I don't hurt anybody. And so they would all say pretty much, everything that I'm doing is lawful. I have the right to do anything. Now, a modern day example of this that reveals all these ways of thinking that I thought about was speeding. Have you ever sped before, you know, on a highway or even not on a highway? When you speed, you might be telling yourself, well, how much can I bend this law really, right? How much over the speed limit is really over the speed limit, you know? How far can I go without getting caught? Or, you know, I'm not really hurting myself or others. There's really nobody around, right? I can speed a little bit. Or if you break the speed limit, let's say, and somebody were to offer to you, you know what? I forgive you. I take your points, I pay your fine, and every time you speed, I'll do that for you. Wouldn't you be like, whoa, really? Oh, that's my license to speed from now on because somebody else is going to take the hit. So all these thoughts, the motivation behind all of them is similar. It's the desire to do whatever you want. Whatever I think I want, whatever I think is good and good for me, I'm free. As you can see with the speeding example, not much has changed since ancient times. Many times we still operate with these thoughts in our heads. Sometimes we default to saying, well, let them do what they want. Why? Because if we let them do what they want, I get to do whatever I want too. But I want to tell you today that the freedom that Jesus gives is not exactly that. Think of it this way. The fishermen that followed Jesus as his disciples, they witnessed some of the most amazing, miraculous things that anyone will ever see, right? They saw water turned into wine. Not just a spoon, not just a bottle, but jars, like vats of water being turned into wine for a wedding party. They saw that happen. They saw the blind from birth starting to see. They saw lame people walking. They saw disease, just skin disease, just disappearing. I mean, they saw all kinds of freedom. Freedom from sin, from shame, from blindness, from disease, from even death. But I don't think anyone would say that the disciples' way of life with Jesus meant they could do whatever they wanted. Right? Would you? I don't think you'd say that either. I mean, if Jesus said to them, hey, we're going to go to the next town today, get up, let's go, none of them are going to say, oh, I want to sleep in a little bit today. Jesus, give me a couple more hours. No, Jesus said, hey, we're going. They're going. If Jesus said to two of them, hey, can you guys make dinner today? It is going to be a special dinner. Can you guys go and make sure that happens? They're not going to say, you know what, we do it all the time. Tell Andrew because Andrew never does it. They won't say that, right? They're going to go prepare the meal. If Jesus sends two of them and saying, hey, go get that colt. Go get that donkey. I have to ride on that donkey. They're not going to say, you know what, you tell us all the time to do this. Go send John. He never does anything. No, they will do whatever Jesus is telling them to do. Actually, when the disciples did whatever they wanted, you know what happened? They started arguing with each other who was better. They kept children from coming to Jesus. They scorned a woman who gave everything she had to Jesus, and they ended up denying him, betraying him, and abandoning him, all doing what they wanted, what they thought was good for themselves. So the freedom that Jesus gives cannot be that kind of freedom, the freedom to do whatever you want. What then is the freedom that Jesus gives? First of all, the freedom that Jesus gives is the freedom from a self-centered life. Freedom from a self-centered life. Here's what the Apostle Paul wrote. He wrote, I have the right to do anything you say. Again, quoting what some people were thinking. And then he says, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is constructive. No one should seek their own good, but the good of others. So while he's thinking about what people were saying, Paul responds to them by saying, yeah, you know what? You might be free to do a lot of things, but not everything you do is helpful. Not everything you do builds people up, either others or yourself. Paul was getting them as followers of Jesus to think beyond what they want and to think about others, to think beyond themselves. And here's the example that Paul gives. He says this, eat anything sold in the meat market without raising questions of conscience, for the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. If an unbeliever invites you to a meal and you want to go, eat whatever is put before you without raising questions of conscience. But if someone says to you, this has been offered in sacrifice, then do not eat it, both for the sake of the one who told you and for the sake of conscience. I'm referring to the other person's conscience, not yours. What's going on here? Meat market, conscience? What's going on? Is somebody on a diet? Here's what's going on, okay? At that time, there would be all kinds of idol worshiping services, right? Ceremonies. And so what would happen at these ceremonies and services is that animal sacrifices would be given at these ceremonies. There would be a sacrifice given to this god, to that god, to the cult of the emperor, to Apollo, right, to that god, to this statue and that statue. They would give these sacrifices of animals. Now, this might be a surprise to you, but I've seen this happen going on even today. I visited a college once, during finals time, and what the students were doing was they were sacrificing their lunches, cheeseburgers and chicken burgers, and putting it at the statue of the school mascot during finals, right? Sometime with notes saying, I want to pass this course or whatever. So, that's the kind of thing that people were doing. They were offering these animal sacrifices in their ceremonies. Because there were so many sacrifices made, there weren't enough people to eat all that meat. So what they would do is they would take that meat that was sacrificed and sell it to the local meat market. Now, people would go and they would buy meat to grill, like on Independence Day, right? And sometimes they would see the meat that was on sacrifice and it's on sale. So you're thinking, I'm going to throw a big party. I've got a lot of guests coming, so I'm going to buy the meat that's on sale. That makes sense, doesn't it? It's not like it's old meat. The sacrifice to Apollo happened this morning, and they brought over the meat in the afternoon. So you're there at the meat market, and you find out, hey, the other meat is $17.99. The ribeye is $17.99 a pound, but the post-sacrifice ribeye is $7.99 a pound. Which one would you buy? It's all the same. So people would buy the meat at a discount and go to this dinner party, and you wouldn't always know at the dinner party where the meat came from. Because sometimes you talk about the food, and it's like, oh, I saw it at ShopRite for this price and that price, and you would hear about it. But other times there's so much else to talk about, you don't know where the food comes from, you just eat it. That's why Paul says, if someone who does not follow Jesus invites you to a meal and you want to go eat, it's fine. But if someone says to you it was offered in sacrifice, then don't eat it. Why? Because someone at the meal might be stumbled by the fact that you're eating it. What if they think that you actually do not follow Jesus because you're eating meat or animal meat that's been sacrificed to another god? You follow me? So Paul is saying, if you know about it, don't do it. Why? Not because of your conscience, but because of the other person, for their sake and their conscience. Modern day example. What if you found out that a friend of yours struggles with alcoholism? Would you then, when you're gathered together, pour a drink when you know that they're there? See, you can not do what you want to do in order to look out for someone else. Parents do this all the time with children. You can not do what you want to do to look out for someone else. Do you hear that? In your freedom to choose what to do in this life, instead of thinking, God will forgive me, how much can I bend these laws? I'm not really hurting anybody. Paul is trying to get the followers of Jesus to think, how can I do good for other people? Instead of thinking, me, Paul is trying to get them to think, others. Brothers and sisters, you can be set free from shame, from blindness, from lameness, from disease, even rescued from death. But as long as getting what you want is still number one priority in your life, you're not free from yourself. You're not free from defining what you think is good for you and spending your whole life trying to get it. Now, that statement, I know, goes against our entire way of life and what it's become in our day and age. Why? Because all the messaging we ever get nowadays is get it your way. Get it right away. But you can be a prisoner of your own desires. Like you can go get surgery now to change the way you look. But if you don't get to a point in your head and in your heart of how God sees you through faith in Jesus Christ, you will still be in the prison of your unhealthy thoughts, no matter how much surgery you get. You will fill yourself with all kinds of things, physically, emotionally, mentally, to make yourself feel better, even to the detriment of yourself and others, because you have not come to a point where you know who you are as God sees you in Jesus Christ. You can be a prison of yourself. Getting it your way is not true freedom, at least not the freedom that Jesus came to give. The freedom that Jesus gives is not the freedom to lead your own self-centered way of life, to define what is good for yourself and pursue it. Well, what then is the freedom that Jesus gives? Because we know what it's not. We know that it's not getting what you want. We know that it's not a self-centered life. Freedom from a self-centered life Jesus gives If you get freedom from something, you're getting freedom to something. So what is that freedom to? Jesus Christ frees us to a way of life that gives ourselves for the sake of others. The Apostle Paul was gripped by this life. Before Jesus became real in his life, he was just like everybody else. It was all about how good he was, how qualified he was, how much better he was than other people. But after Jesus got a hold of him, after Jesus became real in his life, he started living for other people's sake. This is how he described his life in 1 Corinthians 10. He says this, though I am free and belong to no one. There it is. I'm free. But then he says, I have made myself a slave to everyone, to win as many as possible. I have become all things to all people so that by all possible means I might save some. Do you see that? Paul, he's giving his life every day, making himself entirely available to God and to others. And he did it not just so that other people would think he's nice, not just so that other people would treat him as a doormat, get what they want at his expense, but he did it so that somehow, somewhere, someone would come to know Jesus, would come to believe in Jesus and be saved from their own self-centered life. But he wasn't the first. Paul's way of life, it actually came from Jesus' way of life. Please consider this with me. If there was one person who is completely, totally free, can do whatever they want, no limitations, wouldn't you say that that person would be God? God, completely free, no limitations. And yet when Jesus was on earth showing us what God was like, do you know what he did? Everywhere he went, he was serving somebody else. He gave up his life, right? He gave himself by leaving heaven to come to earth. He gave himself by leaving riches beyond compare to be born as a poor carpenter's son. He gave up angels glorifying him every day to come to be with men and women, some who would complain and some who would abandon him, betray him, deny him. He gave himself up, especially on the cross where he died. Philippians 2 says this about Jesus. He says, Jesus, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Jesus, in all of his freedom, he could have done anything. He gave his life for others, so that others would know his love. Jesus could do anything, but his true freedom was freedom from a self-centered life to a self-giving life. Paul tells the Corinthians, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God, so that other people glorify God. Do not cause anyone to stumble, whether Jews or Greeks, the church of God, even as I try to please everyone in every way. For I am not seeking my own good, but the good of many, so that they may be saved. Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. The freedom that Jesus gives is the freedom to give yourself daily for God's glory and for others to know God's good. That's Jesus' freedom, and he gives it to you. You might ask, well, if I keep giving myself for others, what about my life? And the ironic thing is, most of the good things you ever wanted for yourself end up coming the more you think about others. If you've been married or been in a family any length of time, you probably know by now that mutual self-giving increases your joy, not takes away from it. Jesus sets you free from yourself to give yourself for the good of others. So I ask you a question, brothers and sisters, today, would you choose whether you live, I want my right to do what I want, or you live, I want to do what is right for God's glory and for others? You get to choose. If you're not a follower of Jesus, I invite you to put your faith in him and start following him today. He loves you. He forgives you. He wants you to be with him forever. Yes, he frees you from sin. He frees you from shame. He frees you from a broken past. Don't get me wrong. He does that. But when you start to realize his love for you deeper and deeper in your own life, something inside begins to change. His self-giving way of life becomes your way of life. And the more time you spend with him, the more you walk with him each day, he shapes your life just to be like him. Whether you have been following Jesus for years or you start today, this self-giving way of life in Jesus is the salvation and solution for our world today. At least I believe. Everybody wants to get their way. Everybody thinks their definition of good is the valid one. Left, middle, or right, wherever you are on that spectrum, everybody seems to be operating from the perspective, I want to get what I want. I have a right to do anything. I really don't care what happens to other people as long as I get what I want. And brothers and sisters, we've done this to ourselves. Our culture has become your way, right away, one click away. Why? Because it makes more money more quickly. There are very few voices out there that say, you know what, I care about you. What we need is the message of Jesus, and for each and all to turn to him. Followers of Jesus need to be at the forefront of giving ourselves so that others know the goodness of God. Not just thinking about ourselves, what we want, what our rights are, but thinking about others. Every organization that has thought only about itself ultimately closes. But for those who follow Jesus in doing what is good for others so that they might know God, guess what? We've been around 2,000 years, still going strong. Online, offline, in person or not, Sunday, Monday, every day, the followers of Jesus need to reclaim a movement of sharing the love of Jesus through words and through actions so that people might know the love of God. You know, as of this past week, my family and I have been here a year. Can you believe it? It's been a year, right? And one of the things I still cannot brag enough about is the love and the welcome that we've received from the Delran United Methodist Church. I am so proud. I'm so honored to be with you and to be your pastor. You know, when my family and I arrived, you welcomed us with apple pies, pizza pies, cakes, chips, cookies. I mean, sweets after sweets after sweets. I'm amazed I have not gained more weight over the past year. I think I've gained a little bit, but I don't think it's because of the sweets. I think it's because of the quarantine. But anyway, you've given me all these sweets, given my family all these sweets. I don't know why you're trying to fatten me up for whatever sacrifice you're thinking, but whenever we've gathered together, the joy has been evident, the welcome, the love. And I'm not sure I've ever laughed as much as I've laughed here elsewhere as a pastor. And I'm so grateful and thankful for you. 2020 has been a crazy year so far. The pandemic is still raging. Masks are everywhere. I've been to see my physical therapist, I think almost 10 times. I still don't know what he looks like. He doesn't know what I look like. If we saw each other in the street, we probably would not be able to identify one another. And yet, and I know this is a strange thing for me to be saying, for now, wearing a mask seems to indicate I'm thinking about more than just me. I'm thinking about you. And if I were to talk to you about being a welcoming church just a year ago, I would have said, do the things you've done to me. Smile, embrace, laugh, give, care. Give snacks and sweets and fatten people up. I mean, that's love, one way, anyway. But now, for now, I ask you as your pastor, wherever you go, would you wear a mask? This is, for now, I think, how we can continue being the loving and welcoming church that we are. Not because wearing one or not wearing one is about freedom or about rights, but because it's saying, hey, I'm giving up a little bit of my comfort because I'm thinking about you and your well-being. Much like a surgeon washes up, gets dressed up with masks and gloves because he or she is thinking about your well-being. Whether we get together in person or we go about our daily business, let us be the light of the world, the love and the welcome of God. Let us give ourselves in love so that others might know how good God is. Today, for now, it looks like it'll be wearing a mask, keeping distance, and washing your hands. Tomorrow, it will be not a mask, but a smile. Not keeping your distance, but an embrace. And you're still going to have to wash your hands. I mean, that you still got to do. I mean, don't touch me unless you wash your hands, right? I close with this. The war memorial I spoke about earlier, where it is inscribed on the ground. Our nation honors her sons and daughters who answered the call to defend a country they never knew and a people they never met. This is the Korean War Veterans Memorial. 70 years ago, the United States sent thousands of troops to defend a country that most of them never heard of, people that they had never met. Those troops gave their lives. Decades before that, missionaries from the United States, they went to Korea to proclaim the freedom of a kingdom, God's kingdom, to a people that they'd never met before. Those brothers and sisters gave their lives. Freedom is not free. I am with you today. And all of us find ourselves free today because of the sacrifice of someone else, because of the sacrifice of people like I've mentioned, soldiers who have defended freedom, missionaries who have proclaimed an even greater freedom, and Jesus Christ who gave his life to say, you can be really, really free. I don't believe any of them gave their lives because freedom meant the freedom to do whatever you want. Let's not reduce freedom to that. Instead, let us live into the freedom that Jesus gives, the freedom to give up ourselves for God's good for other people. That is what Jesus did for us. I don't know about everybody in the nation. It would be so awesome if everybody in our nation lived that way. But it starts with you. It starts with me. Would you live the life that Jesus lives? The freedom to give up yourself for God's good for others.